All right. Are you looking to build a brand for your e-commerce business? Not just a brand that's going to, last for a few months and kind of be here today, gone tomorrow, but one that's going to be around for the long haul. Well, I'm super excited to have with me today my good friend, Chris Shaffer, who you may know from The Amazing Seller. He is an absolute whiz when it comes to branding. Chris, thank you so much for coming on Maximizing Ecommerce today.
Thanks for having me, brother. Long time. I feel like we haven't talked in a while because we were meeting every twice a week there for quite a while, getting ready for the live event that we did a couple months ago. So I'm excited to get to chat with you again. It feels like it's been ages since I've seen your smiling face.
Yes, exactly.
And we all got the plague, which I still have, apparently. Just the cough, but
oh yeah. Yeah. So for those listening, we worked together to put together Brand Accelerator Live with our mutual friend Scott Voelker, and I think we all got back and we were just sick. It was the craziest thing. It was I had the flu for a week, and it was another week I was barely functional, and here we are a month and a half afterwards, and we've barely talked since, you and I. Yeah, but cool. Well, let's go ahead and get into this. So for those that aren't familiar with your background, can you just tell a little bit about how you even got into the whole e-commerce business?
So I, like most of your listeners, it was a lifelong dream and passion to be involved in selling, stuff online. And so, no, I probably like most of everybody that's listening.
We didn't even grow up with internet. A lot of us,
right? I kind of had it growing up. I remember my first AOL disc when I was a kid, right? And I remember not being able to be on the internet before my parents came home because they wouldn't be able to call the house if there was a problem, right? So that was a rule in my house growing up, right? It was don't be on the internet if we're not home because we can't call if there's not an emergency, or if there is an emergency. But yes, I very gracefully tripped and fell face first into the e-commerce world. You guys may or may not know the name Joel Bauer. You may hear that here on the podcast. He's my partner in a few of our ventures. He was actually my boss at one of my first jobs out of college, my second job out of college, at a tech startup. And he and I were at a marketing conference together in Atlanta, Georgia. It was a Dan Kennedy, the GKIC conference. 8 years ago now? Almost 9 years ago now. And we said, marketing really isn't that hard. And in the startup that we were surrounded by all of these other startup businesses that had no idea how to do anything marketing related, right? If you said the word website to them, they would run fleeing. And these are tech startups, right? So none of them even had a basic concept. So we said, why don't we just get together and do some consulting? And we started working with a few of those companies, and some of the people that we were actually working out of a business incubator. Some of the people that were there were actually inventors, right? Everything we tell you not to do in the TIS world, don't build a product from scratch. Don't do. A lot of that comes from having worked with the people who did all of the other things. So we ended up picking up a client that was starting from scratch. He invented a product that still sells to this day. And he came to us and he said, you guys want to do my marketing? Joel and I gave a speech on how to do personality profiling and marketing, and how to actually understand who your customer is. A lot of kind of what I talked about in shades at Brand Accelerator Live. And we said, sure, why not? Just so you know, we're building everything from scratch. You don't have a website. You've never sold anything online. You don't have a list. You've never done any marketing. It's going to take us a while to get you money. You're going to be paying us to do a lot of work up front before you're ever going to see any return back. He said, oh, that's not a problem. And if you know anything about myself or Joel, you know that that's not how we operate, right? Joel and I very much always have ownership in every business that we work in, even if it's just mental, right? This is our business. Mm-hmm. And if it were our business, it would drive us absolutely insane to pay somebody for 6 months and not see any results. So we got to about month 2, and Joel calls me and he says, man, we got to do something. I know we're 80% done with building the website. We're starting to build an email list. We're starting to do anything. I don't want him to write us another check without having brought in any revenue. And he goes, I was on Amazon that day, and I saw this little button along the side that I never noticed before. This is 2014, maybe. And he goes, I never noticed it before, but it's probably been there the whole time. Do you know anything about this? It says, do you have one of these to sell? Click here. And I was like, no, but I'll take a look at it. And about 3 hours later, we had created our first Amazon listing for that product because we saw that it was going to cost us $30. We said, hey, we'll pay for it. We're not even going to make the client pay for it. We'll pay for it. We know there's traffic on Amazon. And, if we sell stuff, we sell stuff. Woke up the next morning, we had a sale. We were like,
nice.
Oh, this is kind of cool. Next day we sold 2, and then 3, and then 5. And before we knew it, we were at between 10 and 20 a day. And we went out to him. We said, this is how you expand, right? And it's all the stuff that we talk about in the private label world. We need to go find complementary products. You invented this first thing. Here's all of the things that go with it. Let's go get them. And let's go find those things. And so we then started to do some brand building of our own. We started to private label some of our own products and working with some other people. And while we were going through this whole process, we got to not only work with some small businesses, but again, and I'm not gonna claim that it's anything special. It's a mixture of luck, skill, and preparedness, right? I managed to fall face first into basically a white label services opportunity. So we were able to take our little agency that we had, right, our little company, and provide a bunch of services for other advertising agencies that were working with other e-commerce brands, much, much bigger e-commerce brands, Fortune 500, 1000 type companies. So I was able to kind of see behind the curtain of what it takes to build from scratch, and then what the people do that have, for what we would consider, and I say we, people listening to this podcast, basically limitless resources, right?
Right.
If somebody wrote you a blank check, what would you do? Those were the kind of questions that I got to answer for some of those people, which is, it's a lot more fun, but a lot less rewarding, if that makes any sense, because you don't get to see, the same level of impact, but you get to be a little bit more creative and go, what if we did this weird thing that should never work? But we have a limited budget, so why not try it? So we got to see kind of what worked at businesses of all sizes. And I've been able to parlay that over on The Amazing Seller and help Scott and the team over there with all the businesses that they work with as well.
Well, that's pretty cool. Yeah, that would be fun to have like kind of that blank check exercise, because sometimes like people talk about that as kind of a, well, what would you do if you had a blank check? But here you actually got the blank check and got to kind of play around with fairly unlimited resources, because having been at big companies, I know that their pockets can be pretty deep. And if you're,
and that's kind of one of the things that I think had really changed my mindset as a business owner and as somebody who loves helping people in the e-commerce world. Is like, I got to see how some of these companies operate, and it's mind-boggling that they make money. And I know you know this. You're familiar with the concept of baseline budgeting, right, Kevin?
Right.
For those of you guys who don't know, the US broke. A lot of large companies operate this way as well. And basically, if you don't spend all of your money this year in the marketing department, you don't get more money next year. And chances are you probably won't even get the same amount of money.
Yeah.
Which makes no sense. If I can do a better job with less money, shouldn't you give me more money next year to continue doing a better job?
Right.
Which is how most small business owners would think. Hey, I was able to raise sales 20% and I didn't spend everything that we thought we were going to have to spend to do it. Oh, okay, well, we'll just cut your budget 20% next year. What? No, that doesn't make any sense. And so a lot of these companies would come to us and they'd say, we have to spend $10,000 a month on this initiative. Like, okay, but I can spend 6 and get the same results. Doesn't matter, just spend the extra 4. Okay. So as a small business owner,
I don't want to lose my budget next year.
Right. Like as a small business owner and as someone who loves working with small businesses, that gives us all a heart attack. But it's no wonder that, at the end of the year, everybody's cost per click price goes up. It's because these people are running out of time to spend their money, and they literally will just raise their cost per click bids to $20 without caring that they're not going to make a return on investment. But that taught me a lot of valuable lessons, and it let me see kind of which things scale and which things don't, which really helped me kind of get a better understanding of how the whole picture works.
Gotcha. So you got to see quite a bit there. So you're seeing the Amazon side of things, you're seeing from big companies what works with building the brand and things of that nature, online. So you've talked a few times here about, working with small business owners. So what have you learned translates that did work from the bigger companies into the smaller businesses, or what do they need to tweak, I guess might be the other question.
The biggest thing, and this is kind of what you and I chatted about a little bit beforehand, is the strategy stuff really translates the most. We're going to run 900 different retargeting ads, and we're going to build all these crazy funnels, and we're going to do all of this stuff, does not necessarily translate unless you have, for lack of a better term, insane budgets.
Right.
And that is really optimization. That's not the 80% of it, right? You've heard me talk in the past about the Pareto principle, and I'm sure you've mentioned it on the podcast at some point, right? It's the 80-20 rule. Right. 20% of everything you do gives you 80% of the results, and 80% of everything that you do gives you 20% of the results. The 80% of your results comes from the things that work in all businesses. And really where that starts is creating a connection with an audience and cultivating and building that relationship. Not only is that the thing that has worked, but going into 2020, 2025, 2030, and having your number one competitor being somebody like a nameless, faceless Amazon.com, having that ability to truly connect with people and connect with people in your audience, in your niche, is going to be the thing that small businesses, medium businesses, and even large businesses need to really get a handle on, because it's going to be the thing that separates you from the lowest price offer on Amazon and, you know, the guy from China that doesn't care that he's going to get his account banned, that's just going to sell it for $4, even though it's an inferior product or it's not the same thing or whatever. And if you're able to create that relationship, you're able to transcend platform, you're able to transcend medium, and you can play in your business in wherever you think you need to go.
Gotcha. So for someone who says, okay, well, that sounds interesting. I like the idea of having an audience or just a core group of fans or just people that have bought my product and maybe I can get them to buy it again. But the question everyone always asks is, Amazon owns the customer. So for those listening who maybe have a very small list or haven't begun to build a list, how would you recommend they even start?
Well, the very first thing everybody should be doing is building a list. If you haven't launched a product yet, don't even worry about that until you've identified the market. For the last probably 5 or 6 years, because of how easy it was to launch things in the Amazon ecosystem, everybody focused on launching and finding a product. What people need to do is take a step back and say, who does this product actually serve? What is the market? And if you guys haven't launched a product yet, don't start by identifying the product, start by identifying the market. That's going to be the thing that makes the difference in your business. If you already have a product, it's not too late. Take the step back and say, who is this product for? Who needs this water bottle? It's a very purple, very beautiful water bottle sitting here. Right. Who needs that water bottle? Well, it's not going to be somebody that's at home all day. It's going to be somebody that's out, right? This is a fitness water bottle or a sports water bottle. Okay, so maybe I serve the sports market. Okay, what's the thing that I'm passionate about there? Or how can I say, okay, it's purple. Maybe it's the women's sports market. Maybe it has a bicycle clip, so it's the cycling market, right? How can we identify who that product actually is for? Who's the person buying it? That then lets us work backwards and say, okay, how do I get their attention before they're ready to buy, which is really what we're trying to do when we're talking about building a list, when we're doing all that. And if you want to dive into some of the tactical stuff for the Amazon exclusive sellers, we can do that as well. But we need to first take that step back and say, who does my product serve? Who is the market for the product? And then we can start to kind of go down that route.
Okay. So let's, I guess we can take a fork in the road and go 2 different ways there. So let's just start with the market, because at the end of the day, you got to have a market. So even if you're selling, let's just say, garlic presses on Amazon, at a certain point, you're going to need to figure out who is that market, right?
I lost you.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I was just saying at a certain
so let's
point,
just start with the...
Yeah, exactly. So like, really the question is, you know, if you've got somebody who is, let's say they're selling their garlic press on Amazon, and they're trying to figure out what is the market I'm serving, and then how do I start finding attention of people who might be interested in garlic presses, just to use Scott's example.
Yeah, and garlic press is actually a great one, right? Because not everybody needs a garlic press, right? Not everybody who cooks needs a garlic press. So your market is not just people who cook. It's probably cooking enthusiasts, right? Because to even have a garlic press, to even know why you need to buy a garlic press, you have to cook enough to understand and there actually is a difference, believe it or not, between crushed garlic, right, where you take the garlic clove and you smash it with a knife and then you dice it or chop it or do whatever you do with it, and pressed garlic. And you have to have that even level of understanding before you're going to go buy that. Unless you happen to read a recipe that says you need to press the garlic, which generally it doesn't, right? It's up to user interpretation, right? Most good Italian families have at least one garlic press, right? Because they want to get the most out of their garlic clove. And so, you know, it's kind of going through that exact process that you and I just talked about, which is who's actually going to be the person that uses this product. It's not everyone with a kitchen, so we can kind of start at that level. It's not even everybody who likes being in the kitchen, because some people just like to bake. It's not everybody who likes to cook necessarily or has to cook. It's people who enjoy cooking and understand the difference. So it's going to be more of like the enthusiast level, or more people who actually have kind of a basic understanding. They have more than, you know, they can chop an onion, right? They can do a little more than that, and they're getting a little fancy, starting to get a little fancy in the kitchen. That's going to be the type of person who's trying to buy that.
Okay, so now it makes sense. So really what it sounds like is we're looking for more of those qualitative things about your customer than the quantitative data stuff. So it's really more like who is this person and what makes them tick.
Exactly. And I mentioned a couple minutes ago when you asked me kind of how I got my start, Joel and I were talking about like personality profiling and how to talk to your customers. And that's how we ended up with our first e-commerce client. It's a very similar thing here, right? We need to understand who the person is, and then we can figure out where they go on the internet, and that will teach us how they talk and how they think when they're online. And then that lets us set the stage for everything else. So if we can figure out who the user of the product is, it lets us kind of work backwards and say, okay, who uses this? How do they use it? And then where do they hang out? So I can figure out how they talk and who they talk to and all of the other things that they're interested in that I might need to grow my brand, or just to create the connection with the people in that audience.
Got it. So what would be some places you might think of to say, okay, where are they hanging out?
Facebook is a great place to start because Facebook has a group for everything.
That's true.
And if your market doesn't have a group on Facebook, that doesn't mean it's not a market, but chances are it's got one there. You just got to figure out the right combination of things to type in to find it. The reason that I suggest that is because if you guys remember the term forums from the early 2000s, late 90s, right? It was where people who were interested in similar topics would go to talk online, right? If you had a question about X, you would post it in the forum and Kevin would jump on and answer it, or I would jump on and answer it. Facebook groups, the group functionality, serves that purpose in a much more real-time way. And it shows up in your newsfeed. So if you're interested in cooking and you join the cooking enthusiast group on Facebook, I don't own that. If there is one, have fun, go for it.
Right. You won't be hurting Chris's feelings.
Right. Go join it, see how they talk, see the way that they talk to each other. But not only does that give you a connection point where you can talk to your audience, but it lets you learn the lingo, right? It lets you learn how they communicate. It lets you learn the things that they're interested in, the things that they're not, just by sitting there and observing. And you can join 5, 6, 10 of these groups on Facebook that all have a slightly different take on your market. And then you're able to get a much broader picture of how to do that. I would also look for influencers, and it's kind of becoming a dirty word, even though it's always existed, because you have some of these people on Instagram that, you know, bought 500,000 followers and then can't sell 5 t-shirts to their lists. But in every market, there's real influencers, right? There's real people who people like and follow, and cooking is a great example of that, right? Everybody listening to this podcast can probably name 5 celebrity chefs off the top of their head, right? And I'm going to date myself here and say Emeril Lagasse, right? Which is a name probably nobody's heard for 10 years. Rachel Ray, Bobby Flay, right? Like you've got all of these people. All of those people are influencers. But on the internet, you have thousands of people, and you just a step down or 2 steps down from them who have massive raving fan followings in the cooking space. And they're all going to have their own lingo, and they're all going to have their own, you know, their own ways of talking about things. And so I would find a few of those people as well. Not necessarily to connect with the market through those people, although you can if there's an opportunity for that, if you have complementary products or any of those kinds of things, but because it gives you an example to start to follow, because that's really who you want to be as the brand. Whether or not you're the face of the brand, your brand and your brand's personality needs to create that kind of a following, And so by following a few of those people, seeing the types of content that they're putting out, the things that work with their audience, you can start to connect across those 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 different people and say, it's not that he's saying it this way, it's that he's doing it this way. Or it's not that he's the keto guy, it's that he's got jokes, right? So everybody's resonating with his jokes. Doesn't matter what video, he can post a keto video, a non-keto video, doesn't matter. Whatever he posts resonates with his audience. And when you start to watch those videos, read those blog posts, see those tweets, follow those Instagram stories, you're able to create those connections. And you say, okay, if I really want to reach this market, here's how I can take my personality or the brand personality, right? How I want the brand to be perceived, and make it fit with what's already working, so that you don't have to be a pioneer. Nobody should ever want to be a pioneer. Pioneers are the ones who end up with all of the arrows in their backs, right? They are not the ones who made it to the West Coast. It was the people who came immediately after them that followed the trail that they already blazed that actually made it to California and to Oregon. And so, if you can start to follow what's already working for people, you're not going to copy what they're doing. You're going to take a look at what they're doing, figure out why it works within the context of the audience, and then apply those principles to whatever it is that you want to do, whether that's create content, just launch products, you want to create blogs, videos, whatever that next thing is for you. You're able to take a step back and say, here's why it's actually working.
Gotcha. So you're basically looking to see, like, what is the audience saying? What are they reacting to? What is working? Because if it's working for someone else, like you said, success leaves clues. You might as well follow the trail that they've already blazed. So when someone's looking at, like, they say, okay, I want to do some level of content. Now, the thing of it is, you got blogs, you got videos, you got all these different mediums that you could do. How does someone pick, okay, do they just try a little bit of everything, or do they go after 1 or 2 to start with?
I think what you just said, Kevin, is really applicable to this as well. You have to follow the success, right? Now, I'm not saying that if no one has ever created a successful cooking YouTube channel, which is obviously not a thing, right? There's a ton of them. But if no one had ever created one, that if you put a cooking show on YouTube, that it wouldn't work. What I am saying is, maybe let's not start there. Maybe let's start with cooking Snapchat, which we're probably doing this example backwards, but I'm going to go with it, right? Because everybody just wants to see the 3-second clips of me chopping an onion. Everybody that's having success right now
perfect sense.
is doing it on Snapchat. So maybe we start on Snapchat because that's where the audience already is. And then as we start to get our footing and as we start to have an audience, then we can move to the other channels that we want to try, and we can bring some of that audience with us. We can transplant those people to YouTube or to wherever else. And that really kicks that flywheel into gear in whatever platform or medium we want to actually work ourselves into. We come at it running full speed versus, making the track and then having to walk around the track and then having to warm up. We don't have to do that if we come with the audience. So my suggestion would be, start where the audience is. Don't try to force it. So if your audience is exclusively inside Facebook groups, start a Facebook group, join as many Facebook groups as you can. If your audience is very much into YouTube and watching cooking videos on YouTube, then maybe start a cooking channel, right? That doesn't mean you don't put your own spin on it. That doesn't mean you don't do it your own way so that they connect with you. But you do have to start where the audience already is invested. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, like, they're already finding each other, so why not figure out a way to find them? So that way that, like, yeah, it's not a good idea necessarily to go into a group and just start, hey, join my group, here's the link, da da da. But you could at least start off with questions or answering questions, and when you answer questions, people start like, who is this person? And then they start looking into you.
I'll give you an example of that. So you brought up Scott and TAS.
Yes.
So you know how Scott launched the podcast?
Tell us how Scott launched the podcast.
Scott and I met in a Facebook group for Amazon sellers. And there were only 2 or 3 of those types of groups at the time. And I was in there answering a whole bunch of questions. Scott joined and was answering a whole bunch of questions. And it got to a point where he and I basically became the authorities in that group. That was not our group. It was just, a group on Facebook, but he and I ended up answering most of the questions. And when he started the podcast, he just simply posted a link in that group. Like, that was the first thing that he did. He didn't have an email list. He didn't even do most of the stuff that we talked about because he wasn't even sure he was going to keep doing it. His wife made him keep doing it.
Yeah.
Right? She said, it's something you need to do. It's something you're passionate about. And literally the first day There was no email list. There was nothing. He just posted a link to the first episode in the Facebook group and got a bunch of people that downloaded it. And then a bunch of people started asking questions about it. And then it made its way over to another Facebook group that he wasn't even in. And it went through that Facebook group, and a bunch of people started asking questions about things that he was going to talk about on the show. He was just involved in the community. And when he launched the podcast, that's what he did. He added value. He didn't just say, go to my thing, go to my thing, go to my thing. He said, hey, I just answered your question over here on this podcast.
Nice, because right there, he's basically starting off with leading with value and answering questions, and not just like cold coming in, here's the link. It's he had built up goodwill, you had built up goodwill, and then over time, you guys kind of found each other because you were working together. So that might also be a way, if someone's not comfortable being the face of the brand, to find the face of the brand. Because I recently had Alexandra Jimenez, who was also a speaker at Brand Accelerator Live, and she's a legit influencer with over 1 million downloads on her downloads, 1 million visitors to her blog. She wanted to try to find somebody to work with to help her launch a product on Amazon, but she had trouble finding people, from what she said in our conversation. So it was like, there's people that could be the face, but they don't know how to do necessarily the e-commerce side. So if you know the e-commerce side, you could find somebody to do the face. And I know other people that have successfully melded the two, and sometimes just hanging out in the forums, you could find that person.
Well, that's how Scott and I got started, working together to begin with. He sent me a Facebook message, and I think he actually talked about this at Brand Accelerator Live. I found the message because he asked me to dig it up, and he asked me a question, and it was like, hey, I know this is a long question. And he pretty much basically said, he makes fun of me all the time because anytime somebody asks a complex question, I say, it depends. And then I get both answers. Right? He basically said, you're probably going to say it depends, but I'm going to ask you anyway. And so even before the podcast and before us working together, that was a joke between us. But he basically said, like, how do I structure this? Like, it was some sort of a legal question. I was like, dude, I'm not an attorney. Here's how I did it. Go find an answer. And then, we messaged a little bit back and forth, and a few weeks later, he said, hey, I'm going to start a mastermind group with some other sellers. There's going to be like 6 or 8 of us in the group. We're just going to get on. We're going to get on every Saturday. We're going to hold each other accountable. We're going to figure out this thing, right? Because at that point, there wasn't a ton of information out about how the algorithm worked and how you could launch products. Right. So we had our own little way of doing things. And then every Saturday for like an hour and a half, we would jump on and we'd say, all right, here's what happened this week. Here's what I did. Here's the results. Scott would get on. Here's what I did. Here was my results from this week. And we did that for about 8 or 10 months before we launched the podcast. And then when people started asking for, more in-depth stuff, he reached back out and he said, hey man, you answer a whole lot of questions, right? I see you're still active in this Facebook group. And, I'd love to have you as a part of what at that point was called Private Label Classroom. Just gone through several iterations since then. But, it all came out of just contributing value in a Facebook group. And now I have the opportunity to, to kind of share that message on the stage at Brand Accelerator Live and on podcasts like this. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it all starts with leading with value and helping other people. All right. So back to this journey that someone's going on. So we talked about identifying the market. Let's say they got their market figured out, and let's say they're kind of following the journey we just talked about. If they just got started and they haven't launched a product, let's say they've got a product launched. Is there anything they could do to kind of go from Amazon to start finding their audience off Amazon, or is it kind of all the same journey?
My suggestion would still be doing all of the other stuff, right? You still need to work backwards. You need to identify the market. You need to figure out where the market's hanging out. If you've already been selling, you do have a little bit of leg up in that you have a sales history. And even if you haven't been paying attention, Amazon has a customer record. So you can, and depending on who you ask, this is a little bit gray hat, but you can take those names and upload them to a Facebook custom audience and start to advertise to those people. My suggestion would be maybe take it one step further out so that it's not gray hat and make it a white hat, an okay tactic, and market to a lookalike of those people.
Right.
And use whatever list building tactic you feel most comfortable using, but run it to that group so that you're not just grasping at air. You actually have a place to start. That, I think, is the biggest difference. Somebody actually sent an email a couple of weeks ago, and they said, hey, I'm doing a giveaway to build my list. but the only thing I know is like the top level of my market, and I'm in the sports space. Do I just type sports into Facebook ads? Like, you can, but it's a great way to waste a lot of money, right? Like, you're eventually going to find the people that resonate with your offer, but if you can start a little bit further down and maybe type in lacrosse or a specific sport, if you don't have a customer list, or you take that customer list, and if you're selling through your own e-commerce site, just upload them directly. If you're not, if you're selling exclusively through Amazon, I would use a lookalike for it. But Facebook is really good at going, these are the people who look a lot like this guy. And when you upload a couple thousand of them, Facebook is really, really good at saying, okay, well, Nancy in Iowa, Kevin in Florida, Chris in Colombia, they all really like this one book, right? And so they're going to go find all of the other people who like that book, or whatever that connection point is that they find.
Right. Something that we would never have thought of on our own.
I just looked behind you and saw a bunch of books on your shelf.
Oh, yeah.
How I for examples. But that's really the thick of it, right? And then you don't have to go through the guessing process when you're running ads. You don't have to. Facebook looks at all of the connection points, and they play 6 Degrees from Kevin Bacon, right? They go, this person's connected to this person. This is how they're connected. Here's all of the different ways that they're connected, and here's all of the other people that like all of those same things and interact with all and visit all of those same websites and have purchased all of those same things in the past. Facebook has all of that data on you. And so they're really, really, really good at finding those people. And so you don't have to guess if you have that customer list. So that is kind of the leg up. But then for either of those two groups, either people just getting started or people who are already selling and are trying to do the list build, the next step in that is actually figuring out how to get people on your list and doing that. And we can dive into that if we have time. But
yeah, let's dive into a little bit of that. Okay, now let's say we're getting them on a list, have some sort of landing page, some sort of giveaway of some sort. Is that kind of where you're heading?
Yeah, and there's probably 100 different ways to get people's emails, right? One of the lowest common denominator ways, meaning the hardest things to mess up, is a product giveaway. And that's one of the reasons that Scott and I talk about it so often, is because you can do a really bad job and still end up with something salvageable, right? Like, you don't have to be a Facebook ads genius. You don't have, and not saying I'm a Facebook ads genius. I've just run enough ads to know how to, work the system. You don't even have to have the world's best offer for your audience. But if you're able to create a Facebook ad, watch a YouTube video and create a Facebook ad, you're able to get that out in front of people. And Facebook is such a powerful platform that they will start to find the people that are the best fit for that, especially if you have that lookalike audience. And so it's really hard to mess up the offer there. And there's really kind of just a handful of components that you need, regardless of whether you're using a giveaway, an ebook, sign up for my free things list, which also happens to work, which is weird. Going back to, let's use like baseball as an example, right? Click here and sign up for the top 20 tips your kids need to learn before their first Little League practice, right? And we're going to send you one email a day for the next 20 days with each tip. It's going to take you 10 minutes to spend with your kid to teach them how to play baseball, right? Before they ever make it to their first Little League practice. All of those kinds of things work. But the thing that kind of transcends all of that is what's called the market message match. So does the thing that I'm offering match the market that I'm trying to offer it to? So if I'm trying to do the T-ball tips, I'm probably not going to market it to people who are basketball players, right? Like, they don't like anything related to baseball and they love everything related to basketball. It's not going to match the basketball market, right? So I just have to make sure that whatever that thing is, whether it's a giveaway and I'm giving away a bundle of my products or the top products in the market, that I'm advertising it to the right group of people. And then even if my copy's not perfect, even if my headline isn't perfect, they're going to go, yes, I want that. And they're going to opt in. And then we don't have to worry about dialing everything in perfectly. We can kind of, again, and use the Pareto principle and use 20% of the effort to get 80% of the results.
Yeah, and that makes sense to go after like the people like who would be attracted to a certain giveaway. Now, sometimes I've heard the rub that some people have out there, like, oh, it's just people looking to get free stuff. Is there anything you can do, other than just targeting to make sure you've got the right people and to hopefully exclude people that aren't necessarily the freeloaders?
Yeah. So the downside to doing a product giveaway for list building is you are always going to get some element of that, right? If I put together the 20 tips for T-ball toddlers, I'm just going to go with tips for T-ball toddlers. that you're not going to get people who aren't interested in teaching their toddlers t-ball to opt in for that. But it's also going to cost you a lot more to get anybody on that list. So there's a little bit of a balancing act there. You also have to be a little bit better with ads and with targeting than you do with a giveaway, because you can be reliant on Facebook's conversion optimization to kind of pick out the right people for you, even if your targeting isn't great, because you're going to get a lot more people converting, which gives Facebook more data, which means it's easier for you to use. The objection that you brought up is a fairly common objection, which is like, I got a whole bunch of people that aren't interested in my brand. Well, yeah, maybe, but that's okay. They're going to unsubscribe, right? They're going to take themselves off the list, and that's okay, as long as we're aware that there's some sort of, and it's not going to be a large percentage. If you have the right market message match, if you put the right giveaway offer in front of the right audience, you might get 5 or 10% of that, that total number that are just the freebie seekers that went to a giveaway site and they filled out every form on the thing. But the vast majority of people are going to be genuinely interested. And at least you have the connection point of knowing they're interested in the product that they opted in for. The biggest mistake that I see people make, and the biggest place where I see this as an issue, is when people say, oh, okay, I'm going to give away an iPad. You can't give away an iPad. Everybody wants an iPad, right? Now, if you're in the iPad cover market, you got to find something else, right? But you can't give away an iPad that you fill with a bunch of fishing videos if you're in the fishing space, right? Give away fishing gear. Because if I saw a fishing iPad, even if I'm not interested in fishing, I know I can just format it and delete all the stupid fishing videos, and then I have an iPad, right? So I'm going to fill out the thing. So we need to make sure that it makes sense to our audience. And there's two kind of packages that I like to put together. One is the newbie package, right? So what are all of the products that somebody who's just starting to learn how to fish, what are the 10 things that they need to really get the best experience out of fishing, right? And I have no idea what those things are, so I'm not going to list them off. The other side of that would be the experts, right? So if you are if you're an avid fisherman, what are the things that excite you the most about fishing, right? Go find those things. And where you would draw the line as a business owner, where you would draw the distinction is, where does your product fit in that pecking order? Are you the Bassmaster 5000 fishing rod made from stainless steel and graphite, catch a marlin and a shark and not have to worry about the rod snapping? Or are you, Little Bobby's fishing lures, where you're just selling a lure? And if you're selling something that anyone that's interested in the market would buy, I would probably target beginners first. If you're selling something that only the very enthusiastic, niched down, hyper fishermen would buy, then you go with kind of more of the experts package. You're going to get more of the right people by doing that. So if you have more of a product that appeals to the broader market, I would start with the entry level, the beginners, the beginners cooking essentials package or something like that.
That makes sense, and I've never heard it phrased that way. I like the way you talked about that, the beginner versus the expert package, because you're not just saying, okay, it's fishermen or bass fishermen or whatever. It's the starter and the more expert, because the people that are starting, they may not want to invest in the expert thing, whereas, vice versa, the people that are experts might look down on a newbie type product. So if your product that you're trying to sell to them after the fact doesn't match that could also affect how well your giveaway does.
Well, and even if it doesn't affect how well the giveaway does, it's going to affect the return on investment you put into the list. True. Right. And if you're not an expert, right, and we've talked about this is kind of the other objection that we get. Okay, I did the giveaway, I've got this list, now what do I do? Well, you got to send them stuff, whether it's emails, Facebook messages, however you built that list, right? You have to actually communicate with other people. And if your product is an entry-level product, or an everyman fisherman product,
right?
You don't necessarily have to talk about skip casting, right? Which is this weird thing where you skip the bait over stuff. This is the example I used at Brand Accelerator Live. I now know more about skip casting and fishing than I ever wanted to. But you can put bait where no one else can put bait, right? Entry-level fishermen are how do I put bait on a fish hook, right? Like pro fishermen or people who are watching the bass tournament on ESPN 8 the Ocho this weekend are going to be the people who are interested in skip casting. And so we have to know where we fit in that ecosystem. That's not to say that if you start on the entry level side that you can never go to the expert side. But the vast majority of our content, the vast majority of our communication is going to be targeted towards the beginners until we kind of work our way there. Does that make sense?
That does make sense, because you're kind of following along your audience with where they're at. And over time, they'll get better and your offerings could mature with them. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So now you've got this list, whether you did giveaways or whatever the case was to get it. And you mentioned earlier about you got to email them. So how do you cultivate that relationship with them with emails just to stay top of mind? Is it buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff?
Yeah. No. And I can't take credit for this. I ran through my my Brand Accelerator live speech with Joel, actually, and he said, oh, you know what you're actually trying to say here? And it's talk to them like you would talk to a friend, right? Like, how do you treat a friend? You would never say, hey, man, even people who do like the Amway thing, right? Like the what's the network marketing, right? You're taught in that not to like beat people over the head with your offer, right? Like, hey, oh, yeah, this might help you. Like, that's kind of it, right? And that's how you would talk to a friend. If you were trying to talk to a friend about fishing and you know they have a mutual interest in fishing, which if they're on your list, they do, you wouldn't say, hey, you need to go buy all these things. You'd say, hey, dude, I tried this thing this week. You're never going to believe what I got as a result. You're going to want to go check it out. Right. And then if you have a piece of content, you can send them to it, or you can just give them the whole thing right there in the email. But really what you're doing is you're treating the people on your list like people. We get lost, especially in the e-commerce world, in not understanding, because we don't have the physical one-on-one relationship. Like when you walk into the grocery store and buy something, not so much anymore because of self-checkout, but like you had to go through a checkout and like talk to a person. Right. And so they started to get to know you because they're there every week and they get to see the things that you're buying. Oh, did you forget the milk or did you just not need it this week? Right. And you lose that online. You have no concept of who's buying your stuff. It's literally just magic money showing up and then going out of your account for more inventory. Like it just magically appears. And we have to remember that there's real people on the other side of it. Yeah, there's like people who open that weird brown box from Amazon and take our stuff out and use it. And we lose that a lot of times in e-commerce. And email is very easy to do because you're looking at a white box on a computer screen. But there's going to be somebody on the other end of that who opens it and reads it. And I don't, Kevin, maybe I'm just weird, but like when I read stuff, I have a connection with that person. Like if I read an email from you, I can hear your voice, right? If I read an email from Scott, I can hear his voice. And it creates that deeper connection. And it's the same thing with any of your friends. Like the next time, even if you get a text message tonight from a friend, the way that you read it is different from the way that you read texts from me or from Kevin or from anybody else, because you have a different connection with those people. And it's our job to remember that there's people on the other side of that. And if we can treat those people the same way we would treat our friends, we talk to them the same way that we would talk to our friends, then they're going to create that same relationship with us. And then when we need them to do something for us, like ask them to help us move, right? It's the same thing in e-commerce, right? If I have a bunch of friends, I'm going to ask them to help me move and I'm going to pay them with pizza and beer. If I have a bunch of friends in the e-commerce world and I need some help moving some product, guess who I'm going to ask? I'm going to reach out to them and I'm going to say, hey guys, this is on sale. Or hey guys, we're doing this for Black Friday. Or hey, we're about to launch this new product that you've been asking us to get for you, right? So it becomes a lot less slimy. Most people in the online business.
You there, Chris?
Because they have a genuine connection with you and it's something that's genuinely going to be helpful to them.
Yeah, I think I may have lost you there for a second, but it was basically that you wanted a genuine connection with people in the online space, just like you would want it in the offline space. So
exactly
for the people that are listening here and saying, okay, this sounds good and all, but is there like a ratio of like times I should ask for the sale in an email, or so I'm not beating people over the head? Because I think sometimes sales gets a bad word because we're so separated in e-commerce, just as the consumer separated, we're separated. So we don't feel like we're actually asking people to do anything. It's just like, here it is, take it if you want it. Whereas when we're in email, we're now a little more direct. So what is you found works with like how often you ask, or is it every email, or is it, every fifth email? Like what works?
We should always be giving somebody something to do other than just open the email. Email has two jobs, right? When you're creating an email, you have two things to do. The very first thing you have to do is sell the open, right? You have to get somebody to want to open the email. You do that through two different ways. One, if I have a relationship with you, if I really like your emails, I don't even look at the subject line. I just see the emails from Kevin and I open it, right? If I'm kind of lukewarm on you, I'm going to read the subject line first. So we got to make sure that we hook those people in the beginning, either by them having that diehard fan relationship with us, where every email we send, they're going to open it, or by piquing their interest with what's going to be inside. And we can do that a few different ways. Open loops work really well. So if you've ever seen, I'm sure you guys have all watched at least a television show, but like any of the primetime shows, right? You go to the season finale of the show. And unless it's the series finale, they will always end all of the drama and everything that was going on for that season. And then one thing happens. The car flips over, right? Or whatever. Right. And it fades to black. That's called an open loop. And you can do the same thing in email with ellipses. So if you'll never believe what happened, ... Or if you ask a question in a subject line, both of those are open loops. The human brain wants to close the thought. They want to know, it wants to know what's going to happen. So people are going to open the email. So those are two just kind of tricks that you can use. But once you're in the email, you're going to, connect with those people. And then you have to give them something to do, whether it's just, hey, you'll never believe what happened, ... Hey, I was fishing this week and I tried this weird new thing. You're going to want to check it out. I documented everything that I did here, right? And you send them to a blog post. But our second job is to get them to actually interact and to do something with it, right? So that we know that they're actually consuming the email. In terms of how often you ask for a sale, or how often, and I'm going to rephrase your question a little bit, Kevin, to how often should I include calls to action that are monetizable? So how often should I link to my stuff, to my products? And the answer is as often as it makes sense. And I know that sounds like a cop-out, but if you're writing an email,
worded differently.
It sounds like it, but it's not. And I'll give you the example. If you're writing an email and it has nothing to do with your product, but it serves your market, why would you include your product? So if I'm talking about the weird trick that I used, let's go back to the lures example. I sell lures. The weird trick that I used was fishing at night. I don't sell any lures for nighttime. So why would I link over to my products? Because I'm telling them all about this weird thing that they can do. My products can't help them do it right now, but it's something that I know is going to be interesting to them. It's something that's going to resonate with my audience. I'm only going to give value in that email. Now, if my lure is a glowing nightworm lure that catches bass at night better than anything you've ever seen, then you better include a link to it in the email and let them know why. Hey, you're going to want to check this out. I tried this new lure. I decided to bring it into Chris's fishing store because it crushed it for me. Check out the whole process that I used here. And if you want this lure, click here and get it, right? So you're going to link to both of those things. But in the first example, it doesn't make sense to link to a product, so you're not going to do it. What you're probably talking about, though, Kevin, is pure sales emails. And there's really three different kinds of emails to take a step back. There's pure content, right, which is the first type, which is, hey, I did this thing, go look at it. There's hybrid, which is what I just talked about, which is, hey, I did this thing, go look at it, and I can help you if you get this thing, right? Where there's a little bit of a call to action, either to download a checklist or to buy something from us. And then there's pure promotional emails, which the easiest examples like Black Friday, right? Like, here's our Black Friday specials, or a product launch, right? Outside of a product launch or a special event, we're generally not sending any exclusively promotional emails. That doesn't mean that we can't do that, but we generally lean on the hybrid approach because it's much easier to write that type of an email, right? Because you're like, again, you're just talking to a friend, hey, you're going to want to check this out. And if you want to make the most of it, you can get this thing here, right? It's really easy for everybody to write. So a lot of that comes out of laziness. If you want a hard, fast rule, I would follow the Gary Vaynerchuk jab, 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 right hook, right? Send 3 either purely content driven or hybrid emails, well-written hybrid emails, and then say, hey, we have this thing, go get it. So it's kind of a 3-to-1 ratio if you want to have like a hard, fast rule. But if you're doing the other emails right, you don't have to rely on the hard promotional side of stuff as much, because every email that we send, if it's a hybrid, has the potential to be monetized and is monetized. Because even if Susie from Iowa already has our fishing lure, Kevin doesn't, and they're both going to open the email, Susie already bought it, that's fine. I'm not going to click on the link again. Or maybe she does and she buys one for her cousin, right? And Kevin hasn't bought it yet, so he is going to click on the link and he is going to buy the thing. So we don't have to be as nitty gritty about it if we're taking care of the audience's needs first. That doesn't mean we can't send them, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't send them exclusively as promotional emails, but it means that we don't have to be as reliant on them as most people seem to think that they need to be, because they forget that there's that middle ground of the hybrid email. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, because like sometimes people get too tripped up, but like if you're providing value at the beginning of the email and it's just kind of a, oh, by the way type thing, as opposed to an email that's really about, here's all the reasons you need to get this now, here's the link, buy it now, that type of email. Like there's definitely a distinction there. So just to kind of close up here, one thing I do want to talk about is expectations, because I've talked to people that they start going down this road, it's like whether they give it like a week, a month, whatever, maybe they're not seeing the results right away. Because the problem is, if you've been doing this on Amazon, you get like results kind of instantaneously, kind of like how you woke up the first day and you had a result. That people get so wrapped up in like, oh, but I'm used to seeing results right away, good or bad or whatever. When do you know when to judge? And I know it probably starts with depends, but when do you judge it's working, not working?
Well, the first question is what working or not working? Your email strategy or the list building side of stuff, right? The list building side of stuff is really diagnosable because we can see how many people are coming in and how much we're spending to acquire those people. And people always ask, what should I expect to pay? And just from my marketing background, I'm willing to pay up to $2, generally speaking, in most niches to acquire an email, because I know that's going to be the lifetime value roughly of those people. I would prefer not to pay $2, especially up front. And that's why we like some of the things like giveaways. Like some of the giveaways we've run, we've paid 18-19 cents for emails.
Oh, wow.
Right. And to build a list of 6,000-7,000 people that, 90% of those people are still on our email list in that brand. I have no problem paying 19 cents all day, every day to do that. If it's eking up $1.50, $2, then I have to look at, okay, how am I monetizing this on the back end? And then that's where you kind of get into the email strategy portion of it. But let's just say you have the list, right? How do we know if it's working? Well, there's a couple different metrics that you can take a look at. The first one is going to be your open rate, right? If you are doing your job and you're going through that capturing attention process and you're creating that relationship, right? You're doing those first two steps. Even if you're not doing the call to action portion, we're going to be able to tell if those first two things are working for you based on your email open rates. If you're only getting a single digit percentage email open rate, your strategy's broken. Maybe you built the list the wrong way, but chances are those people would have unsubscribed if they didn't like you, because they just get tired of seeing it. So you're missing something in the connection piece with the audience, right? Either your subject lines are bad, or the people who are opening your emails aren't connecting with it. So they're not doing anything. They're not telling other people to open it. They're not sharing it. They don't care. And so we need to address that. If your open rates are good, and for this example, good, I'll just say 10, 15% plus. For us, we like to see 20% plus. That's a really healthy number. And I mentioned at Brand Accelerator Live, we have a sequence that goes out every other day for the first 40 days that somebody's on our email list. And they're actually, on top of that, getting 3 broadcast emails a week on top of the automated ones that go out. That email sequence has a 33% open rate on average. And I think it was a 4 or 5% average click-through rate, right? So that's kind of It's really good.
Yeah.
And I take zero credit for that because it was very easy to write. We just looked at the content that was already working, and then we wrote emails to push people to that content, right? So it's one of those things. Again, we don't have to overcomplicate it. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Let's just double down on what's working. So the next step then, if you're getting a decent open rate, so at 10, 15% plus, we'll just leave everything else in there. Then how many people are actually clicking through to view your stuff, right? If it's less than 1%, chances are you're not even including call to actions in most of your emails,
Okay.
which it blows my mind, but it happens very, very frequently. And I was talking to somebody after my talk, actually. She asked a question during, she said, hey, we're doing this. Our emails are working really well, but then they go to the site and they don't do anything. I said, okay, let's look at it. Well, they didn't have anything for them to do on the site. There was nothing they were taking them to articles that all led directly to their products, and there was no way for people to buy their products, right? And I miss that stuff too in my own brand. It's really easy to see from the outside,
Right.
But it's the things that we have to think about. So one, we got to make sure that we're including something for them to do, whether that's click here to watch the video, click here to read the article, click here to buy the thing. And then two, if we are including those in all of our emails, the thing that's missing is the connection piece, right? The treating them like a friend. And maybe we just have to change our languaging. Maybe we have to change up our approach. Maybe we have to try to not be funny because our jokes don't land with our audience because we have a slightly different sense of humor or whatever it is. But that type of a process lets us kind of dial in on what's happening in the brand. And so if we take a look at first open rate, is our open rate good? Yes or no? If no, fix open rate. If yes, then look at what's happening when they actually get into the email. Are they clicking through and doing the things? If no, fix the connection piece. How are you connecting with them? How are you treating them like a friend? What are the ways that you're cultivating that relationship and treating them like a real person so that when you ask them to do something, when you ask them to come help you move, they're willing and able to do it. If they are clicking through and then they're not buying anything, then you're missing that connection piece, either between the email and the offer that you're making, or just you're actually missing it in the email and you made such a good offer that they're willing to click on it and then they don't like the product. But we have to kind of walk through that process to see what's going on. And it's very diagnosable, which is something that's really, really nice in this space because we can take kind of that 3-tiered approach, what's working, and then how do we kind of take a step back and fix that.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And this has been really helpful. I mean, there's a lot of really good golden nuggets in this in this interview. And I think I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to it again, even though, you and I have talked about this subject quite a few times, but, I still pick up little things here and there. So this has been really good. So for somebody that wanted to learn more about all this, or they wanted to, check out what you've got to say out online, what would they do to go learn more?
I think the best thing would just be to go to theamazingseller.com, check out what we're talking about there. I'm a frequent guest on the podcast there, so you get to hear a lot of that stuff. And then get involved in the social media channels for that as well. Theamazingseller.com/FB for the Facebook group. There's tens of thousands of like-minded e-commerce people in there asking all kinds of questions and getting all kinds of great answers. But that's usually the best place to find me from an e-commerce perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And I've seen you always very active in that group over the years. So,
yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming on here today, Chris.
Anytime, brother.
All right, good deal. All right, well, have a great day.
You too.